I was asked in my first term at Oxford to do a sketch in this one-night show at the Oxford Playhouse. And I'd never written anything, and I'm not really naturally a writer. So I just had to invent a sort of, 5 minutes of something at 48 hours' notice. I just stood in front of the mirror and started to mess about with my face, basically. And this strange, surreal, non-speaking character evolved.
Mr. Bean is the name given to the skin that Rowan can put on to be funny.
You've got a character who is quite intelligent and subversive, but you've also got a character who looks odd and behaves in an odd way and has odd solutions to problems.
He can be pretty mean and actually do some truly unpleasant things.
The story of Bean is inextricably linked with the story of Rowan Atkinson. Although Mr. Bean was only christened in 1989, Rowan has been developing the character for most of his life.
Whenever we try to think of Mr. Bean and how he will react or would react in certain situations that we're thinking of putting him in, I always imagine him as a 9-year-old boy. That's how I always see him. They're sort of anarchists at heart, really, and I think that's what Mr. Bean is. He's an anarchist. He'll obey the rules as long as they suit him.
4.
Rowan Atkinson was educated at Durham Cathedral Choir School. He is still remembered by his old headmaster, Canon Grove.
I had a member of staff named Cyril Watson who produced plays, and one year he chose St. Joan. And it was obviously a spark of genius on his part to see that Rowan was the perfect person for the Dauphin.
It was quite camp. I seem to remember the first and possibly last time I've ever played someone truly camp.
Shaw's own description was that the Dauphin was a pathetic little creature, yet irrepressible, with a cheeky sense of humour, and always liable to get his own way in the end. And that could be a sort of scenario for Mr. Bean.
What do you think you're doing? Pinching my bottom in a hospital queue.
The first impression he gave was that he was an extremely shy little boy. Though he did say that he had begun his sort of career by being taken by the boys down into the change room and asked to make funny faces for them.
I seem to remember standing up in the changing rooms when I was 10 or 11 or something and putting on a performance.
Ainsley, Babcock, Bland, Cart Horse, Dint, Ellsworth Beast Major.
I think it's very likely that the funny faces were myself and my colleagues.
Most of you, of course, didn't write nearly enough. Dint, your answer was unreadable. Put it away, Plectrum. If I see it once more this period, Plectrum, I shall have to tweak you. Don't sulk, boy, for God's sake. Has Matron seen those boils? Horrid little twerp.
I seem to remember making people laugh, but of course that was pre-adolescence. And I think once adolescence set in, that I never really performed off stage or off screen ever again. It was only before the self-consciousness set in. I think I was quite sort of self-contained. Not, I hope, a loner, but sort of not really requiring the constant company of my friends in order to enjoy myself.
Oh.
My interest in visual comedy was based on discovering a film by Jacques Tati called Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, which I discovered when I was in the sixth form at school because I was the projectionist. And myself and a friend were in charge of that operation, and it enabled us to sort of leaf through film catalogues and order whatever films came into our minds. It just struck a chord with me. I so admired it. It was a kind of an uncompromising comic attitude and setting that I really admired. And so that was only a filmic experience which influenced me kind of subliminally.
Monsieur. Hein? Comment? Vous permettez. Hulot.
It was something that I forgot about, really, for the 3 years I was at Newcastle University, from where I went to Oxford University. And it was there, really, that it sort of returned. My background and my natural inclinations were fairly northern. And suddenly I was in this very sort of cultured, more sort of southern environment. And, and I was working with, all my friends, if you like, who were reading classics and English and French literature. I was the only one reading engineering science.
When I first met him, he was nervous. And he was odd. I mean, there was a lot of sort of nervousness about being around women generally, which, of course, is fantastically endearing.
Lorraine.
Morning, Robert.
What do you do at nights?
I beg your pardon?
Do you eat at night? Or what?
Well, as a rule, yes.
Aha! Yes. Yes. Well, yes, well, I do, actually. I quite often go to a pub on my way home. But tonight I thought I'd really splash out on something a lot better. Go somewhere really nice.
Would you like me to join you?
No, don't trouble yourself. No, it'll be, yes? Yes, would that be okay?
In his very first term at Oxford, Rowan had a fortuitous meeting with a student comedy writer.
I saw this little advert in the university newspaper saying we're thinking of getting a comedy review together, meetings at University College at a certain time. So I thought I'd beetle along because I felt as though I had an interest. And Richard was there.
Yes, Rowan and I met at a tiny scriptwriters conference in a Don's room.
In the summer of 1976. And I remember he was very bright, very talkative, which I wasn't.
Because he was very quiet. He didn't say anything for the entire 2-hour meeting.
But he kind of made up for whatever contribution I was lacking from me.
And then finally one day, we were asked whether we had anything we wanted to put into the review that we were going to do. And Rose stood up in the room and performed these 2 sketches that he'd worked out, which were replete with such flagrant genius. Unfortunately, it was the first time we heard him speak. They were completely wonderful.
The Oxford Playhouse provided a showcase where Rowan performed much of his early material, with Richard as the straight man.
At the centre of the Elizabethan world sits the king. Upon the character of the king depends the plot, and so there are many different kinds of king. The benign king. The benign king with a physical defect. The benign king with 2 physical defects. The mad king.
Somebody who saw one of these early shows was BBC producer John Lloyd.
It was not like any review that I had ever seen, partly because of Richard Curtis's genius. The lateral jumps it made in terms of subject matter. It would always just start, and often very surreal and rather European, like a sort of strange. He used to describe them as Czechoslovakian cartoons, where this little man would come on and be chased around the stage by a spotlight with the music of a clarinet playing. It didn't obey any of the rules of student sketch writing. It didn't appear to be like anything else. It wasn't like what we were all doing at the time as Monty Python sketches. And the shows usually took the form of something very visual, sort of mime thing. A famous mime where he mimed to a sort of Beethoven piano sonata.
Another of Rowan's long-term collaborators is composer Howard Goodall.
He is very musical, and we've always done a lot of musical sketches on the stage show, which is probably why I've been more involved than musical directors normally are in a comedy show. He did one where he was a concert pianist playing Beethoven, he did one as a conductor, he did a AC/DC guitar mime, and he did a thing called drumming, which we worked on together.
Well, I was friendly with Richard Curtis, and he was in those days Rowan's straight man. In fact, he was, as I later became, the other person in Rowan's one-man show.
Good evening and welcome to the Boston University Huntington
There were a number of different sketches, different characters, all of which had elements of what later became Mr. Bean. I can remember one when he was a sketch about someone on his first date.
The first crucial step is having arranged to pick up your date not to look like a complete idiot when she opens the door. Best to look as though your attention has been momentarily distracted. But when you do notice her, it is vital to say how pretty she is looking straight away. But don't overdo it.
He is very, very careful about everything he does. He works out everything in advance. And it'll be the same performance every night. But it was much more like preparing a play. And I think in that regard, he is more like an actor than a comedian, that he'll work out, he'll spend, a long time working out the dynamics of a particular scene.
Once in the car, there are various ways of driving. If you drive like this, you might lose her respect. If you drive like this...
And there was a TV show called Canned Laughter, which he did very shortly after leaving Oxford. And there, if you look at the character, you can see how it's gradually forming.
Hi, Lorraine.
He ties you up a lot.
Oh my God, look at the time. Help! Help! Help!
Why do you think he does that job?
Richard Curtis and I were writing a full stage review for Rowan with lots of different sketches, and we wrote a couple of silent ones for him, one of which was called Cheating, which I was particularly involved in, and, well, you know, we co-wrote the whole show. And that later became a Mr. Bean sketch. It didn't change, really, at all. It's just that we didn't actually call it Mr. Bean at the time.
I think what he did is to take elements of those different characters and package them together. And that's, I think, probably how Mr. Bean was born.
You're all about 22. You're touring with one of the great comic geniuses of the century. And you're still 22, and you're 3 friends. So how do you handle that? Because obviously the minute Rowan walks on stage, he has 5,000 people or 3,000 people in the palm of his hand. And it's an extraordinary gift. And we don't really discuss it very much, but that's what's happening.
Hello. It's nice to see you all here. Now, as the more perceptive of you have probably realized by now, this is hell. And I am the devil. Good evening. But you can call me Toby, if you like. We try to keep things informal here, as well as infernal. That's just a little joke of mine. I tell it every time. Now, murderers. Murderers, over here, please. Thank you. Looters and pillagers, over here. Thieves, if you could join them. And lawyers. You're in that lot.
Villains are always more fun to play than good guys. That's a well-known fact. I enjoy characters who have a vindictiveness in them. I always have done it. In the end, it's just more fun.
I think the rest of us found it quite difficult to adjust to the fact that he was becoming very famous very quickly, and we were still who we were. And this was way before Richard had become a well-known writer in his own right, so I think there was quite a lot of adjustment to be done in terms of that. And I think, especially for Rowan, you know, difficult for him to adjust as his friends were always wondering whether he was going to buy the meal or not.
The only thing in which Rowe was naughty during the stage show is he did have a lot of trouble describing it as anything but a one-man show.
I remember saying to him once, you know, pointing at the poster which said Rowan Atkinson in his one-man show, and saying, don't you think that poster's slightly strange? And he said, oh, yes, that typeface should be in green and not yellow. So I thought, well, I won't push it.
John Lloyd asked if I wanted to join this team of people he was getting together to do a new topical, satirical comedy sketch show.
The BBC, who in those days were much more paternal than they are now, said to Rowan, it would be much better if you had some other people in the show, because then if you're good, you'll shine, and if you're not good, they'll support you, and it'll mean you don't have to do a quarter of the work.
So I was at this crossroads, really, and I had to choose between doing a show on my own or doing a show with 3 others. And there was no doubt in my mind which way to go.
And to the presence in his room, he said,
"What writest thou?" The vision raised its head,
and with a look made of all sweet accord, answered,
It was only rarely in Not the 9 O'Clock News that, you know, that my special interest in visual comedy was ever allowed to burst through.
The rest of you will watch a mime called, and if there's any sniggering, there'll be trouble, Alternative Car Park. I said... Well, why didn't you say so? Right, get on with the mime.
I am a mime. My body is my tool.
The ideas we had for visual characters were, you know, rather unfocused, let's say. But the man who bumped into the tree was one of those rare occasions when it sort of got through.
I can remember Richard Curtis and Rowan coming in very early, not the 9 o'clock news, and saying, we've got this great, great script, it's the best script we've ever written. And it consisted of, it says, Rowan is walking down the street and he sees the camera and then bumps into a lamppost. And I turned over the page expecting the great delivery of the line. I said, well, what's this? What's the joke? He said, well, it's really funny. I said, this isn't funny at all. It's hopeless. It doesn't work at all. And they said, well, can we do it? Please, please, please. Can we have a couple of hours with the camera? And I said, sure. They went off and shot it with the director. It came back, and it was absolutely brilliant. It's that shock that you've been working comedy for 5, 6, 7 years, and somebody comes along and says, there's another way of doing this. He has not had to compromise. He's done pretty much exactly what he wants to. The compromises he's made have generally been so as not to upset his mother, you know, not to say too many rude words because she might not like it.
I seek information about a wise woman.
The wise woman. The wise woman.
Yes, the wise woman.
It started off as being something completely different about bicycle thieves in North London. And over time it developed into a medieval sitcom. So how it went down that road, I don't know.
2 things, my lord, must ye know of the wise woman.
Yes?
First, she is a woman. And second, she is...
wise?
You do know her, then?
No, just a wild stab in the dark, which is incidentally what you'll be getting if you don't start being a bit more helpful.
I delighted in Blackadder in those very long, ornate things, you know, Baldric, that's the most disgusting thing I've seen.
Since Cardinal Wolsey got his knob out at Hampton Court and stood at the end of the passage pretending to be a door. Oh, shut up, Balders. You'd laugh at a Shakespeare comedy.
The Blackadders were very complicated by the end, it has to be said, because there were, you know, 6 or 7 people working in a room, all of whom were capable on their own of developing entire projects, attempting to squeeze all their creative energy into a 2-dimensional situation comedy.
Row, row, row your punt gently down the stream. Belts off, trousers down, isn't life a scream?
Fabulous. University education. You can't beat it.
Bravo. Now, what have we here? Name?
Baldric, sir.
Oh, tally-ho, yippity-dap and zing-zang spillet. Looking forward to bullying off for the final chucker?
Answer the General, Baldric.
I can't answer him, sir. I don't know what he's talking about.
Are you looking forward to the big push?
No, sir, I'm absolutely terrified.
The healthy humour of the honest Tommy. Don't worry, my boy. If you should falter, remember that Captain Darling and I are behind you.
About 35 miles behind.
There are two Rowan characters, principally. There's the absolute bastard, who's the schoolmaster character, or Blackadder. And there's the funny wibbly little man. Who's actually an utter bastard as well. They're both bastards.
In 1989, after the consideration of a long list of vegetables, the funny little wibbly man was given the name of Mr. Bean. Quite unexpectedly, this unfashionably silent comedy was an immediate hit. One of the secrets of the Bean visual humour is the careful and highly detailed preparation that goes into filming.
I'm not at all sure that I enjoy acting because I just find it so worrying and difficult. I enjoy planning things, I enjoy thinking about things and, you know, contributing to the creation of things.
The window down or a head emerging if you wanted a nice entrance for yourself, trying to get out of the train.
Almost without seeing the window come down, just the sense of the grappling hand of the hand coming out, you know, where's the norm?
Each and every Bean moment is meticulously choreographed.
I don't know. I suppose I'd seen that he arrives in this shot already sort of faltering, you know what I mean? Though we just get the sense, or at least not necessarily that he's acknowledged his loss of ticket in the opening shot, but he could be looking for it. And I'm still fairly confident.
Yeah.
And then when we pick him up profile, that he's sort of starting to falter and there's a little bit more of the
Yeah.
oh, bloody hell, I haven't got anything.
If this angle works best, that's lovely. The change of direction, if you see what I mean. I'm always aware that if any 10 suggestions I might come up with, 3 or 4 or 5, maybe along the same lines that he's thinking. But I'm always unnerved by the fact that on almost all the other occasions, he's so far ahead that I then have to choose between, you know, open-mouthed admiration or a very quick recovery where I say, yes, I felt something similar would probably do very well, and then scuttle off and try and get to the cameraman before he does.
This bag could do with being 6 inches longer.
6 inches longer?
Yeah, I think so.
How fast can you go?
So one corner of the bag would go through and get stuck, and then he'd come back and then think, well, there's only one way out, and that is to go over the top.
The co-writer, Robin Driscoll, collaborates with Rowan on the improvisation of Bean.
Might be a nice tea bag, you know, if you do a bit of a caterpillar and you get up and you think, well, freedom's inside. So you
One of the reasons why Mr. Bean has gone on is because actually the process of creating him is quite a lot of fun. You think of a basic situation, just as you're walking around, you're in a barber shop, you think, yes, this is a place where people don't talk to each other. And then you sit down at the computer and you think through, as you would with a normal piece of writing, 5 things that might happen.
Sorry, look, can I just leave Jamie here with you for a moment? I mean, I've left my purse in the shop back there. But just give him a good haircut, will you? Be good, Jamie.
Sorry to stop, but I have a feeling that if this happened, that Bean would, or some, you know, normal people would say, hang on a minute, he'll be back in a second and I'm first. You know what I mean? But they'd be, because in the end the real barber's only 10 yards that way. So he would, I'm not sure he would immediately presume to take on the role of the barber unless he had an extra kick. I mean, maybe actually Jamie says something like, come on.
Would Jamie take his own cap off and look at Bean so that we see you? Yeah, like that expectant thing.
Yeah.
And there's a kind of moment between the two of you.
Yes. Yes, that might be quite good. Yeah. Yes, that's quite. Yes, that's quite good. Yes, exactly. Good. Yeah, that might be all I need.
Actually, you have to act it out, because one of the things Mr. Bean is meant to have is not a lot of props. So, like, I remember when I was doing the Royal Lineup one, I put on a jacket, put on a tie, put some handkerchiefs in my pocket, stood in the middle of my bedroom and said, right, what do I do now if I want to try and make people laugh?
Call it Bean-O-Mania.
Madame Attorney, here is Mr. Bean.
O como una alubia y se llama eso, Mr. Bean.
Nous verrons bientôt sur France 3 Mr. Bean. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Bean.
Uninhibited by a language barrier, Mr. Bean has become a truly global success and is now watched in over 100 countries around the world. The character was always meant to be international. The inspiration came to Rowan while on holiday in Italy.
I just remember strolling through Venice and seeing all these souvenir stores selling posters of George Michael and Phil Collins and Duran Duran, I think, at the time, and thinking, well, there you go, you know, Englishmen all, but hordes of Norwegians are very keen to buy posters of them. Why does comedy not have an international dimension? Well, I certainly never wanted pop star recognition and accoutrements. In fact, we did experience it once in Amsterdam when I went as Mr. Bean to sign some videos. And there was this kind of, you know, near riot, and I had to be smuggled out of the back of the stores. A most peculiar thing, you know, when you get a sense of that, you know, what it must be like to be Madonna. But I have to say, it was an experience that I didn't enjoy at all.
But despite this extraordinary success, Rowan was keen for a new challenge. Bean the movie offered a whole new set of possibilities, and in 1996 it went into production.
Reset.
Ludicrously nominated by the National Gallery as their representative, the funny little wibbly man finally arrives in America.
He gets a bit of a warm reception at Los Angeles airport and immediately gets on the wrong side of the police.
Police! Everyone on the floor, now!
Not you, sweetie.
The structure and narrative of a film, if you're aiming to make it any kind of success, has got to be so different to that of a half-hour television program. It is a huge leap to make. And if we were going to go through all the effort and torment of making that leap and trying to make it work, that it seemed logical that we should try to be doing something different with the character. Which goes back again to this idea of trying to explore more facets of the character than we had been able to do on television.
Just because it's a film, we mustn't allow ourselves not to put in straight, funny visual sequences. And so we've had about 8 days of rehearsal where we go into a rehearsal room and the three of us just fool around with basic ideas. Mr. Bean on the plane, Mr. Bean with a pair of wet trousers, Mr. Bean in bed, you know, and stuff like that. And a lot of the funniest things, indeed, in the final movie, well, I suspect, come from those genuinely amusing occasions rather than sitting alone in one's room typing speeches for people.
Well done, you go. That's fantastic. Lean away from him.
Rowan has always been more comfortable working within a close circle of collaborators, and Mel Smith, director of The Tall Guy and co-star of Not the 9 O'Clock News, was an obvious choice to direct the Bean movie.
In the TV programmes, there are no real consequences to what he does. I mean, there are consequences in the short term, within the 10-minute sketch or whatever it may be, to the people who are in the vicinity. The interesting thing about doing a film is that there are real consequences in our story, and what he does actually impacts on other people.
He's a genius, huh?
That's what they tell me.
Well, it looks like a fruitcake to me.
It's so simple, you know, it is so accessible. It's so manifest, really, to anybody. Some people who prefer a bit more intellectual content are probably disappointed by most Mr. Bean sketches and may therefore be disappointed by the film. But that doesn't worry me so much. I enjoy the simplicity of him and his comedy, and the sort of universal identification, I think, that people throughout the world seem to feel for the character.
Wake up. I don't know what to say about Bean. He's clearly a Force 10 disaster area, but God, help me. I like him.
I mean, quite a lot of Bean is very extreme, but quite a lot of the stuff that I like the most is when he's just sitting in a chair in a dentist's waiting room with sort of nothing much going on, and just watching him and how he bides his time always amuses me greatly.
I think Mr. Bean is Rowan Atkinson. I mean, I've sort of seen him be that person in his own life. So I think, you know, they're not that far apart.
If you're going to present a situation visually, I think the character or the personality that you create in order to present visual comedy comes from very deep within you. It's very identifiable as a part of you. Which leads to my theory that actually that you have only one truly good and convincing visual comedy character within you. Nobody has more than one.
Oh.
I sometimes speculate about where I'd be now if I hadn't, you know, decided to take that plunge and write to those agents and take it seriously, and whether I'd be, you know, in some small research laboratory near Swindon, doing amateur dramatics every 3 months, and I'm sure I would be enjoying it greatly.